Hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second series of Lunch and Learns. If you remember in the fall, we did one based on women in leadership. So our second series is going to be about our new world. Now that we're 4 weeks into this new COVID-19 environment, we're going to have a series of experts come and talk to us about what this means for us at work and at home with our families, not just what it is now, but what's going to be different when we do return to normal, and what can we learn during this period? What good parts of it can we take forward with us once we're back in the normal environment? So today we're going to talk a little bit about what has changed at work in terms of how we work together and how we communicate. I want to introduce Dr. Alison Grizzle, founder of Clearview Strategy Partners. Alison works with companies to align their business strategy with their people strategy. She helps companies integrate behavioral and cognitive analytics for better hiring, managing, succession planning, and team building. Alison works with leaders to understand how to use people analytics to impact their bottom line. She teaches leaders how to create individualized management plans that utilize strategies aligned with people's core needs and drives. So, hi, Alison.
Hey Griffin, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. So how should businesses be thinking from a strategy perspective right now?
So, I think one thing that's interesting is as I've talked to my clients, everyone's sort of in a different place right now based on their industry. And so, for some industries, when they're looking ahead right now and they're saying, okay, we're right in the middle of Q2, they just see business as usual. And so, they're not feeling a lot of pressure to rethink their strategy yet. Whereas other companies, in just a short amount of time, have really had to say, wait a minute, our strategy for 2020 has to be completely revamped, right? So some of my clients have seen no loss in revenue. Some of my clients have taken a 50% hit in revenue in a 2-week period. And then other clients have had to shut doors, right, because they're not a non-essential business. Right. And so when you're looking at where we are, everyone has to be looking at their 2020 strategy. So for some people, that might be small shifts, right? They see some things changing in the market that are going to be some new products in the market. Other companies are having to really think about, how do I change my strategy completely to survive? And as you analyze your new strategy, you also have to be thinking about the people that you have in place. Are the right people in place to execute a brand new strategy? So if you're in a business that is completely reimagining itself right now to say, what does my business look like 6 months from now? You're having to ask yourself, who are the people that I have in place? What are things where I might have to right size the organization? Are there places where I need to hire new people? Or are there ways that I can repurpose the people that I already have? And as you were thinking about strategy shifts, I think one thing that's going to be very interesting is some of my manufacturers right now, they have backlogs. So they're like, oh, we're good to go. We have this backlogged business. Well, one thing they're going to need to be asking themselves is, are they going to take a hit 6 to 9 months from now when the rest of the country is back to business as usual? And how are they going ahead and proactively rethinking their strategy for if their sales right now aren't going to be prepping them down the road? Now, as companies are thinking about hiring right now, it's hard for companies to think about hiring right now, but you maybe should. And here's the reason you should be thinking about hiring right now is, for the last few years, we've just had historically low unemployment. And with that low unemployment, it meant when you listed a job and it had certain characteristics you wanted from a knowledge, a skills, a resume, values, sort of behavioral cognitive traits, and you had an amount of money you were willing to spend on the position, it was really, really hard to find someone that checked all the boxes. Well, as unemployment has gone up, it is going to be a really great time to get the right person in the right role. And there's more talent on the market than we've seen in years. And so I think for companies that have a precision hiring process where they clearly understand the roles in their company, they understand the roles in the new strategy that they're putting in place, companies that understand that and have a clear process to match people, right roles are going to be at an advantage right now. If you have a precision hiring process, this is the time to do it because of the amount of talent on the market. So I think, in general, what companies need to be doing is saying, where are we? What are the impacts of COVID-19? Are the impacts right now in this quarter? Are they going to hit us 2 quarters from now? And as I readjust my strategy, what's the world going to look like? And then how do I think about those roles? And how do I think about creating an organization with the right people to fulfill those roles?
That makes sense. I think, so we're fortunate and we're one of the sectors that really hasn't been hit yet. And we may see an impact 3-6 months away, maybe not. We don't really know for some of our verticals exactly how they're going to be affected. But I think one of the challenges we've got to think about is, are we preparing for 6 months from now, right now? Because things are going to be different. Hopefully that means a large influx of work a few months from now, but what are we doing now to get ready for it, to kind of maintain the momentum we had earlier in the year? We don't want to lose that during this period of time, while kind of keeping an eye and being vigilant that, we're not about to get broadside with some change that we don't exactly see coming right now.
Well, I think one thing with you, Griffin, is that some of your verticals have been in just pedal to the metal, right? Y'all do a lot in the banking world, and right now bankers and people are working. They have people working 7 days a week, 12-hour days, a lot around these federal legislation. And I think that that's going to really position y'all, because I think you're going to even see them having to hire more people.
All right, yeah, that makes sense. So what are some of the best practices for companies during this quarantine time period?
So you know what, Griffin? I think the first thing as CEOs have to recognize that their people are scared, right? Everyone is just in the midst of a great struggle. That struggle looks different for each person. So you have people wondering, is my company going to survive this? You may have people working from home that are also caring for their children, right? They are homeschooling and working full time. You have people that are taking care of loved ones, right? And you just have a lot going on right now. For some people, they really, really thrive on working through and with others. And it is very hard for them to just kind of be isolated. So really recognizing that the world, this moment, is difficult, and being empathetic about that, as well as recognizing that you still have a business to run, right? So both of those things kind of have to live together. And so right now, I think best practices are really around a lot of communication at all levels. So one thing I see CEOs and presidents doing are sending out weekly videos or weekly newsletters, sort of a state of the company every week, right? What are highlights you saw this week? What are some things where the company struggled? I even watched a CEO video that really talked about, here's where we are. We've applied for PPP. This is what that looks like. We've taken a huge hit top line revenue. Here are my goals around people. And so really helping people just through transparency and openness about what's going on to impact the overall culture. I also think that managers have to be doing one-on-one check-ins right now, especially if you're used to, y'all are real used to everybody working in the office environment. And now you look behind you and there's nobody there. And so you've transitioned to this work at home, and over communication right now is critical. Now, with respect to that over communication, you also have to really be thinking about accountability because of the fact that we still have to accomplish goals as a company in order to come out on the other end in a good position, right? So as part of this overall crisis, we have to really take care of our people, but we also have to take care of our businesses, because at the end, as a business leader, it's my responsibility to make sure that the business survives. So it is here to employ all those people on the other end, right? And so one thing that I've seen is that some of my companies are recognizing that they didn't have really clear KPIs in place. They were kind of managing, you've arrived at 8, you've left at 5, and you've done some work that leads towards our goals, but it hadn't been really zeroed in, keyed in on, right, on what success looks like for each role. And so I really think right now businesses are having to ask themselves, what does success look like at the end of this 24-hour period, right? So I'm seeing a lot of best practices around using Zoom or Slack or different project management systems. I've seen a lot of CEOs implement what's called morning and afternoon huddles. And so in the morning huddles, they're really looking at, what do we need to get done today? What's on your list? And then on the afternoon huddles, sort of what got done. And I think one of those things is managers have to ask, what were the barriers to accomplishing this task? And how can I help to remove those barriers? It really reminds me of a great book I read a few months ago, and it was not a new book. It's been around for a long time. It's called I think it's called The Ultimate Sales Machine. And it sounds like a sales book, but it's really just a business process book. And in that book, there was a real good chapter on time management. And I think that every CEO needs to be reading that and having their people read that. And it really even looked at, how do you schedule, understand how long a task should take towards the goal, right? Be very goal driven. How do you break down real clearly what 6 hours of your day looks like based on the different tasks you want to accomplish? And then how do you build in 2 hours of responsive time, right? This is my time for got-a-minute meetings. This is my time for responsive emails. This is my time for responding to a different thing that comes up. And then for managers, if they need someone scheduled to shift, really helping people reprioritize their day is critical, because a lot of times as managers in times like this, we're the ones causing some of the chaos by jumping in with new ideas or jumping in with got-a-minute meetings, or, hey, have you considered, I want to do this? And we might derail an entire process that was already in place getting to the finish line for an idea that we really weren't expecting someone to execute. We just called to talk about. And so helping our teams understand that and really thinking about that. And then, so that's the first thing I'm seeing, right? Best practices, over communicate. Daily, sort of weekly newsletters around state of the company, transparency, what we're headed, what are good things I saw. Really being clear on KPIs, really being clear on accountability, and having a lot of check-ins around what are our goals and how are we getting there. Now, the next best practice I'm seeing is beyond the workday. And it's around asking yourself, how do I still own the culture of my company while everybody's gone? How do I focus in and key in on culture, because culture still matters, but now I'm not here to say hello and be the charming CEO, right? So I'm seeing people actually create like fun culture activities to do with their teams. I have seen companies doing games via Zoom. So they have like Friday afternoon game time, and they've played Zoom bingo, or they've played 2 truths and a lie, where everyone has to say, okay, here are 2 truths and 1 lie, and people have to choose what the lie is. I've seen companies do never have I ever, but in a appropriate business way. I've also seen people do meetups via Zoom for coffee, right? So we're going to have a morning coffee together, right? And just have a, not talking about work, morning coffee. I've also seen afternoon drinks, or just sharing time of what's going on. Some companies, like right now, we're doing a lunch and learn for your company. I've also seen companies start a book club, right? And so we're gonna all read this book, and then just some team building activities that people are doing through technology to keep a pulse on their culture. So those are really the best practices I'm seeing right now as people are moving to these remote workforces.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure people who are researchers in, workplace dynamics, the amount of studies that can come out of this period where suddenly the whole world just completely shifted in how we work for a few months. There's going to be a lot of interesting research, I would think, to come out of that about what did this change when this happened over, really like 2 days. Everyone decided to go remote, like on a Thursday, and that next Monday we were all at home.
Well, yeah, and I think the other thing, Griffin, is really the big question that's going to come out of this, and I don't have an answer for this, is what does the work environment look like a year from now? Right? What sort of hybrids are getting created out of this? What sort of new practices are created out of this, so that people are real clear on just different ways to run their business, right? And I think this is going to create some new opportunities. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. So I kind of felt it like last week. I think that maybe the first few weeks of this, we were kind of in like an adrenaline rush, like we were thrown into this fight with this virus, and this is what we got to do. We got to go home. We got to work. We got to take care of kids. And then it's kind of like after 3 or 4 weeks of it, it felt like, all right, this is just it now. And now we really got to think about how we do it. Like we're not in a manic state, just getting things done on adrenaline. So how can managers how can we shift our style to help people during this time period?
So before I answer that, I want to go back to something you just said that's critical, right? I think you're completely right. Your pulse is on this. For the first 3 weeks, people felt like they were wartime CEOs, right? How are we going to fight this virus? And how do I just make these quick moves? And how do I make these quick adjustments? And now we got to be into, okay, that time's gone. This is now a hyper focus on new strategy, going back to that very first conversation, right? Yeah. And that strategy might mean shifts in business, but exactly what you're talking about now, that strategy means now, how am I taking care of my people? How am I managing differently, right? And so I think that's critical, is as a CEO, if you were running around fighting to keep everything alive for a few weeks, just trying to figure things out, now it's time to step back and go, okay, how am I going to get real intentional? Right? It's time to get real intentional, because we're 4 weeks in, and who knows how much longer we're here, right? So, your question was around how do managers shift to better support their people. I think more than ever, managers are really going to have to manage by what I call the platinum rule. So we're from Alabama, and we all know the golden rule, right? Do unto others as we would have them do unto you, right? And the way that has translated into business is we tend to manage others the way we want to be managed. But the platinum rule says manage others the way that they want to be managed, right? So for example, I love a lot of variety. I love a lot of change. I love to go at a really, really quick pace, right? And I love got-a-minute meetings, right? People that work for me, I mean, it's just, I want to jump in and jump out. Well, what I see is variety and excitement. Others see as shiny object syndrome, right? And so this goes in a whole lot of different ways. And so the best way I can typically explain this to people is what is freedom and flexibility to me, to someone else might seem like ambiguity and lack of direction. So I can go in and manage someone with all of this freedom and flexibility from a really 30,000 foot view, and I feel like I'm empowering them to just go and handle it however they want to. And I think I'm just being this great leader because that's how I want to be led. Well, what's interesting is if I'm managing someone that's different than me in regards to that particular behavioral drive, what you find out is I leave a room and they feel like I've given no direction on what I want. So what's freedom and flexibility to me is lack of direction to someone else. What is micromanagement to me might be clarity and specificity to somebody else. So understanding how people want to be managed is critical. I'm an external processor. I like to spitball ideas, right? I like to throw half-baked ideas out in the universe and just talk about them until I make sense. You can even see on your face, you're going, oh, that just sounds horrible, right? And you're much more of an internal processor. You're very analytical. You like to think things through. You want to go into a room, think about it, bake it for a while, and then you want to come talk about it, right? So if I'm managing you, I need to kind of send you an email and say, hey, Griffin, here are the 3 things I need to talk about. Can we talk at 3? So you have times to think things through, right? Because that's when you're going to come up with your best ideas. So really, really understanding your people and what they need from in how they best take action, make decisions, communicate, really understanding those things are critical right now so that you're making sure that you're effectively managing your team.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. So, what about tough conversations in this time period? Because they still need to happen. We can't go 4 months with not addressing issues that are out there and apparent to everyone. And that's something we've worked on a lot the past couple of years, is getting better at being comfortable having those conversations. And now it's totally thrown into a new environment. What are you seeing as like best practices to maintain that level of communication?
So one thing I'm going to address is y'all have done a good job over the last few years of really focusing on those tough conversations. But one thing that's allowed you as a company to focus on those tough conversations is getting real clear about what different roles look like, right? Y'all have spent a lot of time digging in and asking what are sort of the major roles for this particular job. And y'all started to dig into what does success look like for this job. And I think that's a critical component sometimes that comes before the tough conversations, right? It's hard to have a tough conversation when you don't know what the role looks like.
Yeah.
And so I think that's some of the work that y'all have done that's really important that I want to put out before we just jump into tough conversations. Because I think for companies that success of what different roles look like isn't clearly defined, tough conversations kind of feel like they came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. One thing I would say is remember that tone just doesn't come off right through text messages and emails. And especially in this time of stress, right? You might send me an email that told me something I did wrong on a job and it just wasn't even a big deal to you. You were just throwing it off real quickly. And I might lose 3 hours of productivity because I'm so upset wondering what you think about me and are you mad at me? And, am I about to get fired and all of that? So I think really taking the time to jump on the FaceTime, jump on the Zoom, have a WebEx, whatever you're doing for your communication style is critical so that relationship still is at the forefront. But I'm going to go back to our last conversation. You have to understand your people. You have to understand how they respond to criticism so that you can strategically mold conversations to be as effective as possible. Because the reality is, if I still want the person rowing with me in the same direction, and this is just a tough conversation, but it's not a we're about to part ways conversation, then it has to be very well designed to make sure that the point is made in a way that respects the person so that the person is still with me on the other end. Because if I don't structure those conversations well, then there's a whole lot of other problems that I potentially put into place, right? The last thing you want is someone just sort of stewing at home with anger.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that impact culture over that.
Yeah, we've talked about that a fair amount the past year or so, the difference between, what's appropriate for a messaging app, what's appropriate for email, and what really needs to be face-to-face conversation. And I think, we need to remember that we can still have face-to-face conversations. It's really not much harder for us to get on the Hangout than it is to walk down the hall. So
as you've talked with your managers about what's appropriate for different things, right? I think one of the things to recognize too is people are feeling a little bit more stress right now. So if 3 months ago it was appropriate to be handled through an email message, you might want to step back and ask, is that still appropriate, right? Or is that, has it changed just because of the general stress that people are under right now?
Yeah, makes sense. So you know, I'm trying to think about for us what the opportunities are going to be there in 6 months for us, and really, you know, optimistically, I think we'll have a lot of opportunities in 6 months. That in terms of how our business development cycle works, things are just going to kind of slow down for a while, but when it starts back up, the demand that was there is not going to be gone. I think it's going to pop right back at the same time, and you know, we want to be the ones that are positioned to handle that and deliver at a higher level than we can right now. And you know, we kind of have the time to grow a little bit during this period, where maybe some client demands for new implementation work are not as high as they are normally. So what are you seeing there in terms of what we should be doing in this time period?
So really what's interesting is right now I'm seeing a lot of companies going down on their prices for digital learning programs they have, right? They're offering free intros to different things. They are going down on prices because so many people are online and at home. What I really see as an opportunity right now is, as a CEO, for you to be thinking about, where are we headed? Are there any new skills that I need my people to have? Now, some companies are still going at full pace and they the whole 8 hours a day is taken up with just general work, right? But if you are in sort of a lull where the workload has lessened, then it's time to create a strategy around learning, around where you know that you're going to be. So if there is something that you know that you're going to want to do a new marketing campaign and you want an internal person, right, to pick up a new skill for digital marketing, then there was a company out there out of Texas called Digital Marketer that was offering their entire lab course for free for a while, which I'm not sure what the monthly value is of that, but I remember it not being cheap. And people were picking up certifications on social media marketing or content creation and content marketing. But if I'm assigning learning, I want it to be strategic, aligned around what my new goal is. So I'm going to go back to question number one, right? Are we reassessing our strategy and understanding how people might need to be repurposed a few months from now? Because if I'm clear on where I'm headed, then I can use this time to give my people, properly arm them with the skills they're going to need to be able to go with me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you talked a little bit earlier about, you know, we don't know what the world's going to look like in 6 months. What an office environment's going to look like in 6 months. But kind of across that, what do you see as kind of the future of teams and team dynamics? What's going to have you positioned, whatever the world kind of looks like, to be, you know, to still be a team that can function well and work well together?
So I think I'm going to go back to, do you understand what your new company strategy is? Right. One thing I will say is that when I'm developing teams, I need to be developing teams with the strategy in mind. Who on the team is best positioned to lead this particular strategy, right? So, for example, if there's a component of the strategy that's around rapid growth, innovation, driving fast, I might need a particular person to really take that lead, because that strategy is best aligned with sort of that person's natural inclinations. Whereas the strategy is around, you know what, we really, really need to refine our processes, refine our accountability, refine our predictability, that's a totally different person. It's neither right nor wrong. There's just going to be people that are better wired to handle different strategies. So I think one of the questions is also going to be, we have to move away from who has room on their plate right now to handle X, right? And move toward who is best equipped to handle this strategy and what needs to come off of his or her plate in order to let him move forward, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is that I think creating teams intentionally, sort of using people data, will be really important. The more behaviorally diverse a team, the more apt they are to see 360 degrees of a problem, which makes them more effective at solving problems. But the more behaviorally diverse a team is, if not transparently managed with, here are our differences, and here are the ways that we get a lot of momentum, and here are some places that we are going to bump heads. If we can have those conversations in times of peace, then when the struggles come up, we don't implode as a team. Right? Yeah. Because when you have really behaviorally diverse teams, that's when you get a lot of conflict, if not transparently managed. So let's go ahead on the front end and talk about, as a team, this is how we take action, this is how we communicate, this is how we make decisions. Here are places where we have competing drives that that may get in the way of each other, right? And so how do we look at how these things balance each other out in a nice way, rather than how they can end up creating crashes? So I think that's going to be important, is just having people data to really intentionally develop teams and drive teams forward.
Yeah, I think that really helped our executive team after we did that to have some better understanding of how people think and how they approach problems that is very different from you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I could sit and talk with you about this stuff for most of the day, but I don't think people want to lunch and learn that's 2 or 3 hours. And you probably want to move on to another project and 3 more conversations while I sit here and process this one. So,
well, Griffin, I could keep on going and going and going and feel like so deprived of people right now that I need more feeding.
Well, so you got 2 or 3 kind of wrap up themes to take with us as we leave today.
I think some wrap up things are, there's a lot of excellent talent on the market. If you're in a position that you have some positions you need filled, and maybe you weren't even thinking about filling them till Q3 or Q4, I really think this is the time to dive in. If you have a precision hiring process, and I think that you'll be able to find really good people that align align not only with the role, but the values. And so I would say that even though it seems counterintuitive, if I have a long-term plan in mind, go ahead and look at hiring some of those roles now. The other thing I would say is manage intentionally, understand people, understand their core needs. These are very uncertain times, and people's just sort of core behaviors are going to be extra magnified right now. And understanding how to meet those needs in the workplace is going to be critical of your people. And then if you understand the roles in your company and the organizational strategy, and you clearly understand your people and how they need to be managed, then this is also a time to prepare them for shifts that you need if your strategy is shifting, right? How do you prepare them to move to the future with you? Because I think as a leader, it's not fair to just basically say, okay, my strategy shifted and you don't fit, and I didn't do anything to try to intentionally bring you along. Now, if I've tried to intentionally bring you along and you haven't wanted to shift with the company, then then we have to make shifts right now based on what we're seeing going on in the marketplace. So I think those are some things that I would just kind of have as some takeaway messages.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for spending some time talking with us. I'll let you get back to your homeschooling and lunch making or whatever your other roles are right now. And I'm going to do the same. So enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you later.
Excellent. Thank you.
Bye.